I know you had an amendment on the floor. Tell us about it. Tell us about what is important in that amendment.
Right. So my amendment was about what the Republicans have done to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And let me just remind everyone, that's that little agency that has forced giant banks and giant finance companies to return more than $20 billion directly to 203 million people across this country, very popular. And the Republicans, they've actually taken a couple of cuts. They tried to zero out the budget for that agency, which would have meant, of course, that the agency would shut down. The parliamentarians said no, they couldn't do that. That's policy and not budget. But they did manage to persuade the parliamentarian that they could cut the budget, put a cap on the budget that cuts it about in half, just a little less than cutting it in half. And so I stood up and said, let's get rid of that cap. Let's just restore the funding for this little agency so that we have a cop on the beat to help protect everybody who has a credit card, a home mortgage, a payday loan, who uses Venmo, who has a checking account, for all of those financial transactions. Because when CFPB is not on the beat, the chairman of the Federal Reserve reminded us a couple of months ago, there's nobody at the federal level. So wanted that agency at full strength. Every single Republican voted against that and said, nope, let's basically slash it in half, see if we can sideline that watchdog just as much as the parliamentarian will let us. So that was the vote we did earlier that I was the lead on.
And Senator, I know this isn't your trade, but a year from now, if we were to reduce what those Senate Republicans, that vote, to a 30-second campaign ad against them, what would that Democratic Senate ad say they actually did in that vote?
Your Republican senator voted to make it easier for you to get cheated on your credit card. I don't even need the full 30 seconds.
Yeah, you don't.
You can run another one for mortgages. You can run another one for every single financial product. That's why that little agency is so popular. You know who doesn't like that agency? The Republicans and the giant banks that fund the Republicans. You know, the ones who lost the $20 billion that they had to give up when they got caught cheating people.
Senator, I saw Senator Ossoff had an amendment earlier in the day for a higher tax rate on incomes over $10 million. Incomes over $10 million, and every Republican voted against the possibility of a higher tax rate for incomes only over $10 million, which means it would apply only to the first dollar you earn above $10 million.
Yep, exactly right. Or let me give you another one. Lisa Blunt Rochester earlier today had an amendment that said, I get that you guys are cutting Medicaid, that you want to take away health care from 17 million Americans. But I tell you what, could we all just agree that we're not going to take Medicaid away from brand new babies and their mamas when they're in the hospital giving birth? Could we just do that? And every Republican voted no. We're going to remember those votes, and we're going to make sure the American people remember those votes.
Senator, I know as a member of the Finance Committee, you've had a particular attention on the tax side of this, including your history with the subject of trying to get some kind of taxation that is even slightly realistic on billionaires' income, billionaires' wealth. What is this bill, as of tonight, unamended so far by the Democrats, what does it mean for billionaires' income?
You know, this is the staggering part. The Republicans want to take away health care from about 17 million Americans. They want to cut food support for another 4 million Americans. And then they want to use that money to give tax giveaways to billionaires and billionaire corporations. So let me give you just one example on that. Meta, right? They kind of are doing okay, right? What this bill provides is that Meta on the day that the bill gets signed into law, if it goes through as it is right now, Meta will get a check for $15 billion. That's billion with a B, for doing nothing from this point forward, just for being the golden Meta. And just to remind you, Lawrence, that's more money than the federal government spends in a year on childcare for all of our babies. But Meta going to walk away with that $15 billion check. And that's why this bill is so unpopular, not just among Democrats, but among independents and Republicans. And that's why the Democrats' super secret plan here is just to make sure everybody knows the difference between Democrats and Republicans, to keep putting these amendments out there and making those Republicans vote on them.
Senator, in our breaking news coverage of the Senate floor right now, the current vote, as I believe you know, is a vote that says cannot cut food assistance for families with children under the age of 12, I believe. And we're going to see if every Republican indeed does, in this vote to cut food assistance with families of children under 12.
Right. You know, I think here, Lawrence, that the Republicans are just counting on Americans not paying attention. That, you know, somehow they'll get away with this. Or maybe it's what Mitch McConnell said last week at the Republican lunch, when a lot of Republicans were standing up and saying, dang, I'm hearing from people in my home state who are pretty unhappy about cutting medical care, cutting food support, and these big tax giveaways.
Senator Schiff, thank you very much for making the time to join us. I know that it was your amendment that was just on the floor. It was your amendment to guarantee food assistance be continued for families with children under 12, and every Republican in the Senate, 53 of them, voted against your amendment to guarantee nutritional support for children under 12 in this country. Did you think you had a chance of at least peeling off a few Republicans on this one?
I did think there was a chance of peeling off at least a few Republicans because, you know, after all, how do you make the argument that feeding hungry kids is somehow a waste? But that's the argument they're making. They made one additional argument, which is we'd have to go back to committee to fix this, to make sure we're not leaving kids hungry, and we're not willing to spend the time. That was the other argument. This bill is bad in innumerable ways, in taking health care away from people, but in taking food away from our kids. And what's more, not just the kids of today going hungry, but they're also borrowing from our kids and grandkids to pay for this tax cut. So it's just a terrible betrayal, really. And I think about my parents' generation, the greatest generation, and I think about this generation now as reflected in these priorities. And this is the selfish generation, the generation that says we're going to take away from hungry kids and give ourselves a tax cut. We're going to take away from our kids and grandkids, raise the national debt, take money from them to give ourselves a tax cut. It's just awful.
You know, Senator, I've been reporting on what the Republicans, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and with the full support of Republicans in Congress, have done to USAID, in which by killing the United States Agency for International Development, they literally and specifically took food away from starving children in Africa and elsewhere. But right in the middle of a famine in Africa, they pulled the food away. And we have several reports now of hundreds of thousands of deaths as a result of what they've done by taking food away and taking medicine away. But in covering that, one of the things I was thinking, which I haven't really said, is they wouldn't do that in the United States. And it turns out your amendment tells me I was wrong about that.
Yeah, sadly, you would have been wrong if you try to make that distinction. It's just not about cutting off aid to those outside the country. It's about cutting off assistance food to people inside the country. And what's more, with respect to the health care cuts, there are now credible studies that thousands of Americans are going to die as a result of these health care cuts, maybe tens of thousands of Americans. So this is the cost, literally the cost to the American people of this bill: loss of life, more hungry families. And what do we get out of it? What's the benefit? Well, Lawrence, if people out there watching are making more than $5 million a year, they're going to get a tax cut of $346,000 a year. So if you're really doing well, there's a big tax cut coming your way. If you're a single parent trying to feed your kids, then you're in for tremendous hardship.
And Senator, speaking of waste, in the mantra of waste, fraud, and abuse that Republicans want to use, I had occasion to drive by the federal building in Westwood in Los Angeles this weekend, which has the worst use of military troops I've ever seen in my life. It's the most peaceable place, as you know. There's no more peaceful federal building in America than that one in Westwood. And you have soldiers at blocking every driveway there.
Like, what we have here is that Trump has united the Democrats and divided his own party. Democrats have a lot of debates happening right now. Good debates, necessary debates. I'm on Mr. Mamdani's side. Let's make that clear. I support him. I'm a democratic socialist as well. But, like, those debates are happening. And, maybe the worry was, those debates, no one's going to be focusing on this disaster death bill. But they are. The Democrats in the Senate, for all their divisions and disagreements, are united one by one, as everyone in the House is as well, saying this bill is awful. Somebody in my comments basically called it, like, the kill bill. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense that, like, it's going to directly cost lives. Like, we've talked about this, right? In that all of the expert analyses, all of the nonpartisan analyses have said, if you make these changes, there's going to be a whole bunch of effects, but one of those effects will be 50,000 people plus every year won't live anymore because they'll lose their care. They either just won't qualify, or the barriers to get it will be increased and people will fall through the cracks, or people actually do qualify, but by adding the bureaucracy to it, some number of them just won't be able to jump through the bureaucratic hoops that don't need to be there, and they will lose their life. Some people will not lose their life, but end up becoming homeless over it. And so Donald's midnight nightmare is that all he's done is unite Democrats. And the biggest fear now isn't, Mr. Mamdani's changing how the Democratic Party might be. The biggest fear now is actually on the other side, where Elon Musk is saying, if this bill passes, I'm starting the quote-unquote, we covered this earlier, the quote-unquote America Party, which he is basically going to say it's not the Democrats, it's not the Republicans, it's not about left and right, it's about forward. It's going to be far right, right? It's going to be a far right mess. But that will hurt the Republicans far more than the Democrats. If you think this party gets 5% of the vote, 4 of those 5 are going to come from Republicans, right? And that's going to doom Donald forever.